What happens when humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, our weapons, or our conquest of the stars? What if it's something far simpler, yet infinitely more powerful: our ability to see worth in the broken, hope in the hopeless, and potential in the abandoned? In a galaxy where wealth determines destiny and bloodlines decide fate, where alien civilizations measure success by credits and connections, one struggling human engineer is about to discover that sometimes the most extraordinary treasures come disguised as ordinary problems. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with grand quests, but with a simple choice to help someone in need. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a man whose calloused hands and empty wallet hide a heart that refuses to abandon anyone, even mysterious alien strangers whose broken ships might be the key to everything he never knew he was searching for. Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting through the grimy viewport of his workshop at the sprawling maintenance docks of Kepler Station. The massive orbital platform hung in the void between three star systems, serving as a waystation for every species imaginable. From his cramped repair bay in the lower levels, Marcus could see the sleek vessels of the wealthy Zephyrian merchants, their hulls gleaming like polished mirrors, docked alongside the massive cargo haulers of the insectoid that carry traders. His own workspace told a different story. Salvaged parts hung from every available surface, jury-rigged tools sparked occasionally from loose connections, and the air recycler wheezed with the determination of machinery that should have been replaced years ago. The rent notice glowing angry red on his workbench served as a constant reminder that dreams didn't pay bills. Another day in paradise, Marcus muttered, turning back to the Altarian freighter's engine assembly spread across his floor. The blueskin captain had promised payment within the week, but Marcus had learned not to hold his breath when it came to promises. Still, he worked with the methodical precision that had earned him a reputation among the station's less affluent visitors. Human engineers were rare in this sector, and Marcus had discovered that his species' particular blend of stubbornness and ingenuity made him valuable to those who couldn't afford the high-end repair facilities in the upper docks. The calm system crackled to life, making him jump. "Chen's engineering, if it's broken, I can probably fix it," he answered, not bothering to look up from the plasma conduit he was rebuilding. "Marcus Chen?" The voice was melodious, with an accent he couldn't place. "I'm told you work on vehicles others won't touch." That got his attention. Marcus set down his tools and activated the comms video feed. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure in a worn traveler's cloak, the hood drawn up to obscure their features. What he could see suggested humanoid characteristics, but the image was deliberately kept shadowy. "Depends on the vehicle and the problem," Marcus replied cautiously. "I'm not in the business of fixing stolen ships or modifying weapons systems." "Nothing illegal," the figure assured him. "I have a personal transport that's experienced some difficulties." "I was told you have experience with hybrid technology systems." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Hybrid systems were notoriously complex, combining technologies from multiple species. Most engineers specialized in one or two alien tech bases, but necessity had forced Marcus to become something of a generalist. "Where's the ship?" "Docking Bay 847. When can you take a look?" Marcus glanced at the freighter parts scattered around his workshop, then at the rent notice. The Altarian captain still owed him for 3 previous jobs, and his food processor had been making concerning noises for the past week. "I can be there in 20 minutes. Standard diagnostic fee is 50 credits, due up front." "Understood. I'll meet you there." The connection ended, leaving Marcus staring at the blank screen. Something about the call felt off, but he couldn't put his finger on what. The voice had been carefully modulated, almost artificially neutral. And why meet at a docking bay instead of bringing the ship to his workshop? He shrugged and began gathering his portable diagnostic kit. Credits were credits, and he couldn't afford to be choosy. Docking Bay 847 was in the mid-level commercial section, several tiers above Marcus's usual haunts. As he made his way through the station's corridors, the walls gradually became cleaner, the lighting brighter. The crowd shifted from rough traders and mechanics to well-dressed merchants and minor bureaucrats. Marcus felt increasingly out of place in his stained coveralls, but he pressed on. The docking bay doors stood partially open, and Marcus could see the outline of a ship inside. As he approached, his steps slowed. The vessel wasn't like anything he'd seen before. It was sleek and organic-looking, with curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. The hull appeared to be composed of some kind of adaptive material that shifted slightly in the light, creating an almost hypnotic pattern of colors. "Impressive, isn't she?" The voice came from behind him, and Marcus turned to see the cloaked figure approaching. Up close, he could make out more details. Definitely humanoid, but taller than most humans, with movements that suggested inhuman grace. The cloak obscured most physical features, but he caught a glimpse of pale skin and what might have been silver hair. "I've never seen anything like it," Marcus admitted, pulling his attention back to professional matters. "What's the make and model?" "It's custom. One of a kind, you might say." The figure gestured toward the ship. "The propulsion system has been experiencing irregular power fluctuations. The onboard diagnostics aren't providing useful information." Marcus circled the ship slowly, his trained eye taking in details. The landing gear appeared to be a blend of Terran hydraulics and vegan energy field technology. The hull sensors looked like modified Centauri designs, but with components he didn't recognize. "Who built this thing?" "A friend. Someone with eclectic tastes in technology." Another non-answer. Marcus was beginning to suspect his client was either very paranoid or hiding something significant. He decided to focus on the job at hand. "I'll need access to the engine compartment and primary systems." "Of course." The figure produced a small device and pointed it at the ship. A section of the hull simply dissolved away, revealing an opening large enough for Marcus to enter. He tried not to gawk at the casual display of advanced technology. The ship's interior was even more impressive than the exterior. The walls seemed to glow with soft, ambient light that adjusted automatically as he moved. The corridors curved in ways that shouldn't have been possible given the ship's external dimensions, and Marcus found himself wondering if the vessel incorporated some form of spatial compression technology. The engine room, when they finally reached it, took his breath away. The central power core was unlike anything he'd encountered in 20 years of engineering. It appeared to be contained pure energy, held in place by a network of field generators that hummed with barely restrained power. Conduits of what looked like crystallized light fed into systems that defied easy categorization. Holy! Marcus caught himself before completing the expletive. "This is incredible. I'm not sure I'm qualified to work on something like this." "My research suggests you're more qualified than most," the figure replied. "You've successfully integrated Altarian plasma systems with Terran mechanical components. You've modified the Carry biomechanical interfaces to work with standard human neural patterns. Most engineers wouldn't attempt such combinations." Marcus felt a flush of pride despite his circumstances. "You've done your homework." "But this," he gestured at the impossible engine, "this is beyond hybrid technology. This is next-level engineering." "Yes. It is." The figure moved closer, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and starlight. "The question is, are you willing to try?" Marcus stared at the engine core, his mind already working through possibilities. The diagnostic fees alone for a system this advanced would cover his rent for months. If he could actually fix it, the payment would be substantial. But, more than the money, the challenge called to something deep in his engineer's soul. This was the kind of problem he'd dreamed of solving when he first left Earth. "I'll need complete access to all ship systems," he said finally. "And full transparency about any safety protocols. I won't risk blowing up half the station." "Agreed. There are some unique features you should be aware of." Over the next hour, his mysterious client walked him through systems that seemed to blend technology with something approaching magic. The ship's computer responded to voice commands in dozens of languages, including several Marcus had never heard. The environmental controls maintained perfect atmospheric conditions without any visible machinery. The navigation system appeared to calculate jump vectors through spacetime in real time. "Who are you?" Marcus asked as they completed the tour. "Nobody just happens to own a ship like this." The figure paused, and Marcus sensed some internal debate. "Someone who values anonymity. And someone who needs the ship operational as soon as possible." "Running from something?" "Running towards something, actually." The voice carried a note of sadness. "I have obligations that require travel to the outer systems. This ship is the only way I can fulfill them." Marcus nodded, sensing there was much more to the story but respecting his client's desire for privacy. "I'll need at least 3 days to properly diagnose the power fluctuations. Possibly longer if the problems are more complex than they appear." "How much? For a full diagnostic and repair of a system this advanced?" Marcus did some quick calculations. 2,000 credits, plus parts if needed. The figure reached into the cloak and produced a credit chip. "There's 3,000 on here. The extra is for discretion and priority service." Marcus stared at the chip. 3,000 credits would solve most of his immediate problems and give him breathing room for the first time in months. "You must really need this ship fixed. More than you know." The figure turned toward the ship's exit. "I'll check back tomorrow evening for a progress report." "Is that acceptable?" "More than acceptable. You've got my full attention." As his client disappeared into the station's crowds, Marcus stood alone in the docking bay with the most advanced piece of technology he'd ever encountered. He ran his hands over the ship's hull, feeling the subtle vibration of systems he barely understood. Whatever he'd gotten himself into, it was certainly going to be interesting. He spent the rest of the day running basic diagnostics, carefully mapping the ship's systems and trying to understand how they interconnected. The power fluctuations were subtle but consistent, occurring in a pattern that suggested some kind of feedback loop in the energy distribution network. By the time station evening fell, he had a rough understanding of the problem, but solving it would require delving deeper into systems that seemed to operate on principles he'd only read about in theoretical papers. As he locked up the docking bay for the night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled into something much larger than a simple repair job. The ship was worth more than most small planets, and his client's insistence on anonymity suggested secrets that went far beyond mechanical difficulties. Walking back through the station's corridors, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow with an excitement he hadn't felt in years. For once, he wasn't just fixing someone else's mistakes or jury-rigging solutions to keep ancient systems running. He was about to work on something truly extraordinary, something that challenged every assumption he had about what was possible. The credit chip in his pocket felt warm against his leg, a tangible reminder that sometimes the best opportunities came disguised as ordinary service calls. Marcus Chen had always believed that every problem had a solution if you were willing to think creatively enough. Tomorrow, he'd find out if that philosophy applied to impossible alien technology owned by mysterious clients who paid 3 times the going rate for discretion. Whatever he'd gotten himself into, there was no turning back now. And, for the first time in months, Marcus found himself smiling as he walked through the station's dimly lit corridors, already planning his approach to the most challenging engineering problem of his career. #Deeper Mysteries. Marcus arrived at Docking Bay 847 the next morning with renewed energy and a thermos of the strongest coffee the station's food courts could produce. The ship waited in the dim lighting like a sleeping creature, its adaptive hull surface shimmering faintly with internal energy patterns. He'd spent half the night researching hybrid propulsion theories, and the other half trying to reconcile what he'd seen yesterday with everything he thought he knew about spacecraft engineering. The ship's access panel responded to his approach, dissolving away to admit him. The interior lighting brightened gradually as he made his way to the engine room, carrying his expanded diagnostic equipment. Today would be about getting past the surface-level scans and diving deep into the ship's quantum mechanical heart. Setting up his instruments took the better part of an hour. Marcus had jury-rigged interfaces between his standard human equipment and the ship's exotic connection ports, creating a bridge between 2 very different technological philosophies. When he finally activated the deep scan protocols, the results made him sit down hard on a convenient equipment crate. The power fluctuations weren't random. They were following a mathematical pattern so complex that his diagnostic computer needed several minutes just to map the basic variables. More troubling, the fluctuations seemed to be getting worse, following what looked like a degradation curve that would lead to complete system failure within days. "This is not good," Marcus muttered, pulling up secondary analysis screens. The energy containment fields were stable, but the distribution matrix was developing resonance patterns that could cascade into a feedback loop. If that happened while the ship was in hyperspace, the results would be catastrophic. He was deep in calculations when footsteps echoed through the ship's corridors. Marcus looked up to see his mysterious client approaching, moving with that same inhuman grace he'd noticed yesterday. In the ship's improved lighting, he could make out more details despite the concealing cloak. Definitely humanoid, but with proportions that suggested non-human ancestry. The hands that emerged from the cloak's sleeves were elegant and long-fingered, with skin that seemed to have a faint luminescent quality. "How's the diagnosis progressing?" the melodious voice asked. Marcus stood, wiping his hands on his coveralls. "I have good news and bad news. The good news is I understand what's causing the power fluctuations. The bad news is it's worse than I initially thought." The figure's posture shifted slightly, a movement Marcus interpreted as tension. "Explain." "Your power distribution matrix is developing harmonic resonances. Think of it like a bridge that starts swaying in the wind. At first, it's just a small movement, but if the frequency matches the bridge's natural resonance, the swaying gets bigger and bigger until the whole structure collapses." "How long do we have?" Marcus consulted his readings. "At current degradation rates, maybe 4 days before the resonance reaches critical levels. After that, any attempt to engage the hyperdrive could result in a complete power system failure." Silence stretched between them as his client absorbed this information. When the figure spoke again, the voice carried new urgency. "Can you fix it?" "Yes, but it's going to be complicated. The resonance is being caused by microfractures in the quantum field generators. I can repair those, but I'll need to essentially rebuild the power distribution network from scratch. It's delicate work, and one mistake could destabilize the entire system." "How long?" 3 days, working around the clock. "And I'll need some specialized components that aren't exactly standard inventory on Kepler Station." The figure moved closer to the central power core, and Marcus noticed the ship's ambient lighting responded to their presence, growing slightly brighter. "What components?" Marcus pulled up his requirements list. "Quantum field harmonizers, preferably military grade. Crystalline matrix stabilizers compatible with your energy signature. And I'll need access to a molecular fabrication unit to create custom interface components. The harmonizers and stabilizers I can acquire. The fabrication unit might be more challenging. Where would you normally obtain such equipment?" "Upper deck facilities, typically. The kind of places that charge more per hour than I make in a month." Marcus paused, studying his client's reaction. "Unless you know someone with connections?" Another pause, longer this time. Marcus got the impression his client was weighing options, perhaps considering how much to reveal. "I may know someone. But it would require exposing myself to scrutiny I prefer to avoid." "Look," Marcus said, setting down his diagnostic tablet, "I don't know who you are or what you're running from, but I'm starting to get the feeling this is about more than just fixing a broken ship. If there's something I should know that affects the repair work, now would be a good time to tell me." The figure turned away from the power core, facing Marcus directly for the first time. Even with the hood shadowing their features, Marcus could see eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "What would you say if I told you this ship represents technology that could change the balance of power in 3-star systems?" "I'd say that explains why you're willing to pay 3,000 credits for discretion." Marcus crossed his arms. "I'd also say it doesn't change my job. I fix things. I don't ask questions about politics or power balances. Even if those politics could affect your own species?" That gave Marcus pause. Humanity was still relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Human colonies remained small and vulnerable compared to the established alien civilizations. What kind of effect? The kind that could mean the difference between humanity remaining a minor player in galactic affairs, or becoming a true power. The figure gestured toward the ship's systems. This technology could be adapted for human vessels. Imagine human ships that could outrun any pursuit, outmaneuver any threat. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature controls. "You're talking about military applications. I'm talking about survival. There are forces in this galaxy that would prefer to keep humanity contained to a few border systems. This technology could change that equation. And, you're just going to hand it over to humanity out of the goodness of your heart? The figure's laugh was musical but held bitter notes. Goodness of my heart has very little to do with it. Let's just say I have my own reasons for wanting to see the current balance of power disrupted. Marcus studied the mysterious being before him, trying to process this new information. Yesterday's simple repair job was apparently connected to galactic politics and interspecies tensions he barely understood. Part of him wanted to walk away, to return to the comfortable simplicity of fixing freighter engines and station maintenance systems. But a larger part of him was fascinated by the possibilities. If this technology could really give humanity an edge in the galactic community, didn't he have an obligation to help? And, beneath the political implications, the engineer in him was utterly captivated by the technical challenge of working with such advanced systems. I need those components, he said finally. Whatever political games are happening above my pay grade, that ship needs fixing before the power system fails completely. His client nodded slowly. I'll make some calls. But, Marcus, the use of his first name was startling. Once I start reaching out to certain contacts, there will be questions asked. People will want to know why I need these components, and some of them have resources to find answers I might prefer to keep private. Are you saying this could become dangerous? I'm saying that fixing this ship might attract attention from parties who have strong opinions about who should and shouldn't possess advanced technology. Marcus looked around the engine room, at systems that represented decades of advancement beyond anything humanity had yet achieved. What kind of attention? The kind that carries weapons and asks questions later. The figure moved toward the ship's exit. I want you to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't just about credits anymore. Marcus followed, his mind racing through implications. You're giving me the chance to back out? I'm giving you all the information you need to make an informed decision. I won't lie to you about the risks. They stood in the ship's main corridor, artificial sunlight streaming through viewports that showed Kepler station's bustling docks. Marcus watched cargo haulers and passenger transports moving through the organized chaos of interstellar commerce, representing dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. Somewhere out there were forces that wanted to keep humanity relegated to the margins of that community. If this technology is as important as you're suggesting, Marcus said slowly, why trust a broke engineer in a rundown repair shop? Why not take it to a major corporation or a military contractor? Because major corporations and military contractors have obligations to various governments and power brokers. They have oversight committees and reporting requirements. They have loyalties that might not align with the best interests of getting this ship repaired quickly and quietly. And I don't? You have something more valuable than corporate resources or military connections. You have the flexibility to act without committees and bureaucracies slowing down the process. And, from what I've observed of human nature, you have something else that's even more valuable. Which is the tendency to do the right thing simply because it's right, rather than because it's profitable or politically expedient. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. Don't I? You could have charged me 5 times your quoted price for work on a ship this advanced. You could have demanded answers about the technology before agreeing to the job. Instead, you quoted a fair price and focused on solving the engineering problem. That tells me quite a lot about your character. Maybe I'm just not very good at business. Maybe. Or maybe you understand that some things are more important than maximizing profit. Marcus walked to one of the viewports, looking out at the station's vast superstructure. Millions of beings from dozens of species lived and worked here, representing the complex web of relationships that made interstellar civilization possible. Humanity was still finding its place in that web, still learning the rules of a game that had been playing for millennia before Earth achieved spaceflight. If I do this, he said without turning around, and if it attracts the kind of attention you're worried about, what happens to me afterward? I can't guarantee your safety. But I can promise that if this technology benefits humanity the way I believe it will, you'll have played a part in securing your species' future in the galaxy. That's not exactly a concrete answer. It's the only honest answer I can give you. Marcus turned back to his mysterious client. In the improved lighting, he could see more of the face beneath the hood. Definitely not human, but not entirely alien either. The features were elegant, almost aristocratic, with high cheekbones and eyes that held depths he couldn't fathom. "Get me those components," he said. "But I want something in return." "What?" "Your name. If I'm going to risk my neck for galactic politics, I want to know who I'm working with." The figure hesitated, then reached up and pulled back the hood. Marcus found himself looking at features that were stunning in their alien beauty. Silver hair fell in waves around a face that seemed carved from moonlight. The eyes that had seemed to glow were actually a pale blue-white color that caught and reflected light in unusual ways. "My name is Lyralii," the being said. "And you should know that helping me repair this ship may be the most important thing you ever do." Marcus stared at the revealed face, trying to process the trust implied in removing the concealment. "What species are you?" "I don't recognize the physiological markers." "That's complicated. Let's just say my people prefer to avoid galactic politics whenever possible." "But you're involved in them now." "Circumstances have forced my hand." Lyralii's expression grew distant. "There are obligations I cannot ignore, no matter how much I might prefer a quiet life." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand obligation. It's what brought me to this station in the first place." "Oh?" "My father always said that engineers have a responsibility to fix what's broken, not just for the people who can afford it, but for the people who need it. It's not the most profitable philosophy, but it's kept me sleeping well at night." Lyralii studied his face with those unusual eyes. "I think I chose the right engineer." "We'll find out. Get me those components, Lyralii. Let's see if we can fix what's broken." As his client replaced the hood and prepared to leave, Marcus felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been making rent. Now he was apparently involved in technology transfer that could affect interspecies relations and humanity's position in the galaxy. But, as he looked at the ship's incredible systems, at the marriage of technologies that shouldn't have been possible, Marcus felt the familiar excitement of a truly challenging engineering problem. Politics and danger aside, this was the kind of work he'd dreamed of doing since he first picked up a wrench. "Lyralii," he called as she reached the ship's exit. "Whatever obligations you're talking about, whatever political games the ship is connected to, just remember that for the next 3 days, my only obligation is to fix your power system. Everything else can wait until the job's done." She paused at the threshold, turning back with something that might have been a smile. "Understood, Engineer Chen. See you tomorrow." As Marcus watched her disappear into the station's crowds, he found himself wondering what kind of obligations could force someone with access to such advanced technology to seek help from a struggling repair shop. Whatever the answer, he suspected the next few days were going to be far more interesting than his usual routine of fixing cargo hauler engines and patching atmospheric recyclers. He turned back toward the engine room, already planning his approach to rebuilding the power distribution network. 3 days to save a ship, and possibly to change humanity's future in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Marcus Chen had always believed that every problem had a solution. He was about to find out if that applied to galactic politics as well as quantum engineering. #dangerous complications. Marcus was elbow deep in the ship's power distribution network when the first sign of trouble arrived in the form of footsteps that echoed wrong in the ship's corridors. He developed an ear for different species gates during his years on Kepler Station, and these footsteps belonged to someone trying to move quietly while wearing heavy boots. Military boots, most likely. He carefully set down the quantum field harmonizer he'd been installing and reached for his portable scanner, activating its passive detection mode. 3 signatures appeared on the display, moving through the ship with the systematic precision of a search pattern. None of them registered as Lyralii's elegant biosignature. Marcus quickly sealed the power core housing and grabbed his emergency toolkit, slipping toward the engine room's secondary exit. Lyralii had shown him the ship's maintenance passages yesterday, narrow conduits designed for repair work that could be accessed from multiple points throughout the vessel. If someone was conducting an unauthorized search, he preferred to observe them before they observed him. The maintenance passage was cramped but well lit, with handholds positioned for beings of various physiologies. Marcus made his way toward the main corridor, moving as quietly as possible while his mind raced through possibilities. Had station security finally noticed the unusual ship in the docking bay? Were these representatives of whatever faction Lyralii was apparently opposing? Through the passage's observation port, Marcus could see three figures in dark clothing moving through the ship's main corridor. They weren't station security, whose uniforms he knew well. These beings were taller than humans, with the characteristic elongated limbs of the Andromedan species. More concerning, they carried scanning equipment that looked far more sophisticated than standard security gear. Detailed energy readings throughout the ship, one of them was saying in accented standard galactic. The quantum signature matches the target specifications. Any indication of current occupancy? Asked another, this one wearing what appeared to be officer's insignia. Negative for active biosignatures, but the environmental controls indicate recent presence. Human metabolic markers in the atmosphere. Marcus felt his blood chill. These weren't casual investigators, they were tracking the ship specifically, and they knew about his involvement. He activated his communicator on the emergency frequency Lyralii had given him, keeping the signal as brief as possible. Unknown visitors aboard the ship. 3 Andromedans with military-grade scanning equipment. They're tracking your quantum signature and know about human presence. The response came back almost immediately. Maintain concealment. Do not engage. I'm 20 minutes out. 20 minutes. Marcus looked at his chronometer and tried to calculate how long a thorough search of the ship would take. The Andromedans were being systematic but not rushed, which suggested they weren't worried about interruption. That probably meant they'd disabled the docking bay's security monitors. Sir, the third Andromedan called from the direction of the engine room. You need to see this. Marcus watched through the observation port as the three figures converged on his work area. The lead investigator, the one with officer's insignia, pulled out a scanner and swept it over the partially disassembled power distribution network. Remarkable, the officer said. Someone has been attempting to repair the resonance damage. The technique is crude but surprisingly effective. Human engineering techniques, observed another. They favor mechanical solutions over elegant energy manipulation. Yes, but look at this integration work. Whoever did this has managed to interface standard galactic components with the ship's exotic systems. That requires either exceptional skill or exceptional desperation. Marcus felt a perverse pride at the backhanded compliment, even as he watched the investigators catalog his work with professional interest. The officer was making notes on a recording device while the others continued their scans. The human is working to restore full functionality, the officer concluded. This suggests either cooperation with the target or exploitation of the target's desperation. Should we wait for the human to return? No. We have what we came for. The quantum signature confirms this is the ship we've been tracking. The ongoing repairs suggest the target will not be abandoning the vessel. We know where to find them. The Andromedans began moving toward the ship's exit, but the officer paused at the engine room threshold. Leave a monitoring probe. I want to know the moment this ship's power system comes fully online. Marcus watched one of the subordinates place a device no larger than his thumb against the ship's bulkhead. The device seemed to meld with the metal, becoming virtually invisible. When they were gone, he waited another 10 minutes before emerging from the maintenance passage. The monitoring probe was sophisticated, far beyond anything available to ordinary security services. Marcus studied it with his scanner, careful not to trigger any defensive systems it might have. The device was designed to monitor energy signatures and transmit data via quantum entanglement, making detection or jamming nearly impossible with standard equipment. But Marcus Chen hadn't survived 20 years of engineering by using standard approaches to non-standard problems. He retrieved a specialized tool from his kit, one he'd designed for working with quantum mechanical systems. Instead of trying to disable the probe, he began modifying its quantum signature, introducing a harmonic distortion that would make its readings unreliable without triggering obvious malfunction indicators. He was finishing the delicate work when Lyralii arrived, moving through the ship with urgent grace. She found him kneeling beside the probe, his toolkit spread around him like a surgeon's instruments. How long were they here? She asked without preamble. 20 minutes, maybe 25. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Marcus stood, wiping sweat from his forehead. They called you the target and seemed to know about this ship's quantum signature. This wasn't a random search. Lyraliai's expression grew grim. Andromedans? 3 of them. Military bearing, sophisticated equipment. They left a monitoring probe, but I've introduced some quantum static into its readings. It'll still function, but the data will be corrupted enough to buy us some time. Clever. Did they say anything about their intentions? Marcus recounted the conversation he'd overheard, watching Lyraliai's face grow increasingly troubled. When he finished, she stood silent for several moments, apparently weighing options. We need to accelerate the repair timeline, she said finally. How much longer do you need? Another day and a half, minimum. I've installed the quantum field harmonizers you acquired, but the crystalline matrix stabilizers require careful calibration. Rush that process, and we risk destabilizing the entire power core. And if those Andromedans return with reinforcements? Then, we'll have bigger problems than power fluctuations. Marcus looked around the engine room, mentally cataloging the work still to be done. Lyraliai, I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. How much danger am I in just from being associated with this repair job? She met his eyes directly. Considerable danger, I'm afraid. The Andromeda Collective has been tracking this ship for months. They believe it represents a security threat to their hegemony in the outer systems. And, does it? Yes. But, not in the way they imagine. Lyraliai moved to the central power core, placing her hand against its containment field. The ship's lighting responded, growing brighter with what seemed like eagerness. This ship doesn't just represent advanced technology, Marcus. It represents freedom. I'm going to need you to explain that. The Andromeda Collective controls most of the hyperspace navigation routes between the core systems and the frontier. They charge tolls, dictate shipping schedules, and essentially control who can travel where in this part of the galaxy. Ships with technology like this could bypass their checkpoints entirely, using quantum tunneling to create direct point-to-point travel. Marcus felt the implications hitting him like physical blows. You're talking about breaking up a transportation monopoly. I'm talking about giving smaller species and independent colonies the freedom to trade and communicate without paying tribute to Andromedan bureaucracy. Humanity included. And the Andromedans would see that as an act of war. They would see it as an intolerable threat to their economic dominance. Which it is. Lyraliai turned back to Marcus. I told you this might attract dangerous attention. You didn't mention we'd be breaking up interstellar trade monopolies. Marcus sat down on an equipment crate, trying to process the scale of what he'd gotten involved in. How did you get hold of this technology in the first place? That's complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated. I think I deserve some straight answers. Lyraliai was quiet for so long that Marcus began to think she wouldn't respond. When she finally spoke, her voice carried notes of sadness and resolve. My people developed this technology generations ago. We used it to explore the galaxy, to establish trade relationships with dozens of species. We believed that free exchange of ideas and resources would benefit everyone. What happened? The Andromeda Collective happened. They saw our transportation technology as a threat to their emerging control over hyperspace routes. They demanded we share it exclusively with them, giving them a monopoly on advanced travel. And you refused? We tried to negotiate. We offered to share the technology with all species equally, to prevent any one civilization from dominating galactic transportation. Lyraliai's expression grew distant. The Andromedans were not interested in equality. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. They attacked your people. They didn't need to attack. They simply made it clear that any species trading with us would face economic sanctions, blockades, and worse. Within a decade, we were completely isolated. Most of my people chose to withdraw from galactic society entirely rather than submit to Andromedan control. But you didn't. I couldn't. I watched as species after species fell under Andromedan influence, as independent colonies were forced to pay tribute for the right to trade with the core worlds. I watched humanity struggle to establish itself in the galactic community while being slowly pushed toward the margins. So you stole this ship? I inherited it. And I've spent the last 5 years traveling the frontier, documenting the damage that unchecked Andromedan influence has caused to developing civilizations. Lyralii moved closer to Marcus. Do you know what I've learned? Tell me. That humanity has something most species lost long ago. The willingness to fight for what's right, even when the odds are against you. The determination to help others, even when there's no immediate benefit. The stubborn refusal to accept that things can't be changed. Marcus felt heat in his cheeks. You're idealizing us. Humans can be just as selfish and short-sighted as any other species. Perhaps. But, in my experience, individual humans consistently demonstrate a moral courage that's become rare in the galaxy. You agreed to repair this ship knowing it might be dangerous. You've continued working even after learning about the political implications. Why? Marcus considered the question seriously. Because it's the right thing to do. Because if this technology can help humanity and other species break free from economic domination, then I have an obligation to make sure it works. Even at considerable personal risk? Especially at considerable personal risk. If the only people willing to challenge injustice are those with nothing to lose, then justice becomes impossible. Lyralii studied his face with those luminous eyes. You realize that completing these repairs will make you a target of the Andromeda Collective? They don't tolerate threats to their authority. Then, we'd better make sure the ship is fast enough to outrun them. Marcus stood and moved back toward the power distribution network. How much time do we realistically have before those Andromedans come back? Hours, perhaps a day at most. They'll want to capture the ship intact if possible, which means they'll bring a boarding party rather than simply destroying the docking bay. Then, we work through the night. I can complete the matrix stabilizer calibration in 12 hours if I don't stop for sleep. Marcus looked at Lyralii seriously. But, I'm going to need your help. This ship responds to your presence in ways that suggest some kind of biometric integration. I can repair the systems, but optimizing them will require your direct interface. What do you need me to do? Be prepared to link directly with the ship's consciousness while I bring the power core online. If there are any resonance issues during startup, you'll need to compensate in real time. Ship's consciousness? Marcus gestured toward the engine room around them. This isn't just advanced technology, Lyralii. The way the ship responds to your presence, the adaptive lighting, the self-repairing hull panels. This is artificial intelligence at a level I've never encountered. You're not just the pilot, you're symbiotically linked with the ship itself. For the first time since he'd met her, Lyralii looked genuinely surprised. How did you figure that out? 20 years of engineering experience and basic observation. The question is, why didn't you tell me? Because most species find the concept of truly sentient starships disturbing. They prefer to think of ships as tools rather than partners. Marcus looked around the engine room with new understanding. What's the ship's name? Serenity. And she's been looking forward to meeting you properly. As if in response to Lyralii's words, the ship's ambient lighting shifted to a warmer, more welcoming tone. Marcus could have sworn he felt a sense of anticipation in the air itself. Well then, he said, rolling up his sleeves and returning to his work. Let's introduce ourselves properly and get this lady back to full health. We have a monopoly to break. Behind him, he could hear Lyralii's soft laughter, musical and full of hope. For the first time since the Andromedans' visit, Marcus felt confident that they could complete the repairs in time. The question was whether they could escape Kepler Station before the Collective's forces returned in overwhelming numbers. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, he had a sentient starship to heal, and Marcus Chen had never met a challenge he couldn't fix with enough determination and the right tools. #Revelations and repairs. Marcus had been working for 16 straight hours when the ship began to dream. He first noticed it as subtle changes in the ambient lighting, colors shifting through spectrums that seemed to follow emotional rather than practical patterns. The temperature fluctuated gently, as if the ship were breathing. Most telling, the quantum field readings showed patterns that looked less like mechanical resonance and more like neural activity. Serenity's responding to the repairs, Lyralii explained, sitting cross-legged near the power core with her eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation. She's been dormant for so long that full consciousness is returning gradually. Marcus paused in his calibration of the matrix stabilizers, wiping sweat from his forehead. Dormant? Ships like Serenity require a symbiotic bond with their pilots to function at full capacity. I've been traveling alone for 5 years, maintaining only basic communication. She's been sleeping, essentially using minimal consciousness to keep vital systems operational. And now she's waking up because the power system is stabilizing? She's waking up because she trusts you. Lyralii opened her eyes, those luminous irises reflecting the ship's shifting light patterns. Serenity has been monitoring your work, observing your approach to her systems. She's impressed. Marcus looked around the engine room with new awareness, wondering if he was being watched. It feels strange, thinking of the ship as a person. Most humans would find it disturbing. Your species has a complex relationship with artificial intelligence. Maybe because we're still figuring out consciousness ourselves. Marcus returned to his work, but found himself moving more carefully, as if he were performing surgery rather than mechanical repair. How long have your people been creating sentient ships? Thousands of years. It began as necessity during our early space exploration. Ships that could think and adapt were more likely to survive long voyages through uncharted space. Eventually, it became cultural tradition. We don't just build ships, we nurture them into existence. And Serenity? Lyralii's expression grew tender. She was my grandmother's ship originally. Built for exploration and discovery, designed to seek out new forms of life and establish peaceful contact. She's seen wonders that most beings can't imagine. Your grandmother was an explorer? Among other things. Lyralii stood and moved to a control panel, her fingers dancing over interfaces that responded to her touch like living things. My family has always been interested in unusual ventures. Something in her tone made Marcus pause in his work. What kind of unusual ventures? The kind that sometimes require leaving home for extended periods. The kind that involve significant financial resources and political complications. Marcus set down his tools and looked at Lyralii directly. You're being deliberately vague again. I'm trying to decide how much to tell you. Some information could put you in even greater danger. At this point, I think I'm already committed to whatever level of danger we're talking about. Besides, I work better when I understand the full scope of a problem. Lyralii was quiet for several moments, apparently wrestling with internal debate. When she spoke, her voice carried new gravity. My grandmother wasn't just an explorer, Marcus. She was one of the wealthiest individuals in the galaxy. Our family controls mining rights to entire star systems, manufacturing facilities that supply half the known species, transportation networks that compete with the Andromeda Collective's monopoly. Marcus felt the implications hitting him like a physical force. You're not just some refugee with advanced technology. No. I'm the heir to one of the largest industrial empires in the galaxy. And I've been using that wealth to fund resistance movements, support independent colonies, and undermine Andromedan control wherever possible. For 5 years? For 5 years. I've been traveling incognito, avoiding the obligations that come with my position, trying to make a real difference instead of just managing corporate interests from behind a desk. Marcus sat down hard on an equipment crate. You're a billionaire. Several times over, yes. Though most of my wealth is tied up in assets I can't access while maintaining my current anonymity. And you've been letting me charge you standard repair rates for working on a ship worth more than most planets. Lyralii actually smiled at that. Would you have worked differently if you'd known? Marcus considered the question seriously. Probably. I would have been more intimidated, more worried about making mistakes. I might have overthought everything instead of just focusing on the engineering problems. Exactly. I needed someone who would treat Serenity as a ship that needed fixing, not as a priceless artifact that required reverent handling. But, now that the repairs are almost complete, you're telling me? Because now we face decisions that go beyond simple mechanical work. Lyrali gestured toward the ship's main display, which showed a tactical readout of Kepler stations surrounding space. 3 Andromedan cruisers have arrived in the system. They're not here for a casual visit. Marcus studied the display, noting the positions and apparent capabilities of the approaching warships. How long do we have? They'll need several hours to navigate the shipping lanes and request docking clearance without arousing station security's suspicions. But, once they dock, they'll have overwhelming force to seize this ship and anyone associated with it. So we need to leave before they arrive. We need to leave, yes. But, there's a complication. Lyrali brought up another display showing the ship's current power status. The repairs are 90% complete, but the final calibration requires a full system integration that takes 6 hours minimum. If we try to engage the hyperdrive before that process is finished, the resonance feedback could destroy the ship. Marcus studied the technical readouts, his engineer's mind automatically calculating alternatives. What if we don't use the hyperdrive? Standard sublight engines might be enough to reach the system's edge and jump to hyperspace from there. Serenity's sublight drives are still operating on limited power. We'd need at least 12 hours to reach minimum safe distance for hyperspace entry. And the Andromedans will be here in 4 hours. Exactly. Marcus stood and paced the engine room, his mind racing through possibilities. What about a partial system integration? Enough to give us hyperdrive capability without full optimization? Risky. If the quantum fields destabilize during jump entry, we could end up scattered across several dimensions. But, possible? Theoretically. Marcus looked around the engine room, at the systems he'd spent 2 days learning to understand. Serenity's consciousness was more active now, light shifting in patterns that seemed almost like anticipation. The ship wanted to fly again, to escape the confined docking bay and return to the vast spaces between stars. What happens if we're captured? He asked. The Andromedans would confiscate Serenity and likely imprison both of us as threats to galactic security. They'd study the ship's technology, but they'd never allow it to be shared with other species. And if we escape? Then, we continue the work. There are dozens of colonies that could benefit from this transportation technology, hundreds of species that could break free from Andromedan economic control. Including humanity. Especially humanity. Your species is at a crucial point in its galactic development. The choices made in the next few decades will determine whether humans become full partners in the galactic community or remain perpetual junior members dependent on other species' goodwill. Marcus made his decision with the same practical approach he applied to engineering problems. We attempt the partial integration. I can modify the quantum field generators to provide stable resonance for basic hyperdrive operation without full system optimization. The risks are acceptable compared to certain capture. Marcus was already moving toward his equipment, mind shifting into problem-solving mode. I'll need 3 hours to reconfigure the field generators and install temporary stabilizers. Can you delay the Andromedans' approach? How would I do that? You said your family controls significant resources. Use them. File injunctions about station docking rights, create bureaucratic delays, demand inspections of their vessels for customs violations. Buy us time. Lyrali nodded slowly. I'll need to break communication silence, which will expose my location to anyone monitoring galactic financial networks. Will that matter if we're gone before they can act on the information? No, I suppose it won't. She moved toward the ship's communication array. 3 hours, Marcus. Can you really modify quantum field generators in 3 hours? I can if Serenity helps me understand her systems better. Marcus looked around the engine room. I'm going to need her active cooperation for this to work. The ship's lighting brightened noticeably, and Marcus could have sworn he felt a sense of eagerness in the air. Serenity was ready to fly again. Over the next 3 hours, Marcus worked with an intensity that surprised even him. But he wasn't working alone. Serenity guided him toward critical components, highlighted optimal connection points, and even anticipated his needs by adjusting her internal configuration to make difficult repairs more accessible. It was like working with a partner who understood not just the technical requirements but the artistic flow of the work itself. Lyralii, meanwhile, made contact with her family's corporate offices for the first time in 5 years. Marcus could hear her voice carrying through the ship's corridors as she filed legal challenges, demanded regulatory reviews, and generally created enough bureaucratic chaos to delay the Andromedan approach. Her transformation from mysterious refugee to industrial heiress was startling to observe, her voice taking on tones of authority and command that suggested years of experience managing complex organizations. Status report, she called as Marcus completed the final field generator modifications. Temporary stabilizers are installed and calibrated. Hyperdrive capability is restored, but we'll have maybe 10 minutes of safe operation before the unoptimized systems start developing new resonance issues. 10 minutes should be enough to clear the system and reach a safe jump point. Lyralii appeared in the engine room doorway, no longer wearing the concealing cloak. Marcus got his first clear look at her and understood why she'd maintained anonymity. Lyralii was strikingly beautiful, with an otherworldly elegance that would draw attention anywhere in the galaxy. The Andromedans? Delayed but not stopped. They've filed priority override requests that will be approved within the hour. We need to leave now. Marcus gathered his tools with practiced efficiency. What about my workshop? My life here on Kepler Station? I'm afraid that's over, Marcus. Once the Andromedans discover your involvement, Kepler Station won't be safe for you. Lyralii's expression grew apologetic. I'm sorry. I know you didn't ask for your entire life to change when you agreed to a simple repair job. Marcus looked around the engine room that had become as familiar as his own workshop, at systems he'd learned to understand and trust. Where would we go? I know of colonies that need engineers, worlds where your skills would be valued and your safety protected. Or... She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. You could come with me. Help me continue this work. Your insights into human engineering philosophy could be valuable in adapting this technology for other species. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Someone with your integrity and skills working with unlimited resources to break up transportation monopolies and give smaller species the freedom to chart their own course. Marcus considered the offer as he completed his preparations. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been making rent. Now he was being offered the chance to help reshape galactic civilization. Let's get off this station first, he said finally. We can discuss employment opportunities once we're not running from Andromedan cruisers. Lyralii smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her. Serenity, are you ready for departure? The ship's lighting shifted to a warm, golden tone, and Marcus felt a vibration through the deck that seemed almost like purring. Whatever else happened, the ship was eager to return to space. Serenity's ready, Lyralii confirmed. The question is whether we are. Marcus looked around the engine room one last time, at the hybrid of human engineering and alien technology that represented hours of challenging, satisfying work. Whatever the future held, he'd proven to himself that human ingenuity could adapt to challenges beyond anything he'd previously imagined. I'm ready, he said, and found that he meant it completely. They made their way to the ship's bridge, where viewing ports showed Kepler Station's docking bay preparing for departure. In a few minutes, they'd either escape to safety or face capture by forces that viewed their work as a threat to galactic stability. But Marcus had spent his life fixing broken things, and, for the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something that might actually fix what was broken in the galaxy itself. #Freedom's flight. The escape from Kepler Station began with bureaucracy and ended with miracles. Marcus strapped himself into Serenity's co-pilot seat as Lyralii initiated departure procedures, her fingers dancing across control surfaces that seemed to anticipate her every command. Through the bridge's transparent aluminum viewports, he could see the vast structure of Kepler Station rotating slowly against the star field, millions of lights representing the lives and dreams of countless beings from across the galaxy. Docking control, this is independent vessel Serenity requesting immediate departure clearance, Lyralii spoke into the communication array with professional calm. Serenity, you are not scheduled for departure until 0700 hours. Please explain the nature of your emergency. Marcus watched Lyraliai's expression shift into what he was beginning to recognize as her corporate persona. Docking control, this is Lyraliai Vexthera of the Vextherat Industrial Consortium. I am invoking emergency departure protocols under Commercial Priority Code 77 Alpha. There was a long pause on the communication channel. Marcus could imagine the duty controller frantically looking up commercial codes and corporate hierarchies, trying to determine if the name carried the authority it seemed to claim. Understood, Ms. Vexthera. Emergency departure clearance granted. Please proceed to exit Vector 7 and maintain standard traffic separation. Acknowledged, Control. Thank you for your assistance. As Serenity lifted smoothly from the docking bay, Marcus felt the ship's consciousness reaching out to embrace the vast spaces opening around them. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced, a combination of mechanical precision and organic joy that spoke to something fundamental about the relationship between sentient beings and the machines they created. How long until the Andromedans realize we've departed? Marcus asked, watching the station fall away below them. They're monitoring departure logs in real time, so they know already. The question is whether they'll pursue us openly or try to maintain the fiction that this is a routine security matter. Marcus studied the tactical display, which showed their progress toward the system's edge and the positions of the 3 Andromedan cruisers. The warships had changed course and were now moving to intercept, though they were still several hours away at conventional speeds. They're not trying to be subtle, he observed. No, they're not. Which means they're confident they can capture us before we reach hyperspace. Lyraliai's hands moved across the ship's controls with practiced ease. Time to find out if your repairs were successful. The quantum field generators are holding steady, but remember, we have maybe 10 minutes of safe hyperspace operation before the unoptimized systems start developing problems. 10 minutes should be enough to reach the Kepler Nebula. From there, we can complete the full system integration in safety. Marcus felt Serenity accelerating, the ship's momentum building with smooth power that spoke of perfectly balanced systems. Through the viewports, Kepler Station was now just a bright point among many, and the star field ahead showed the swirling colors of the nebula that gave the system its name. Hyperspace entry in 60 seconds, Lyraliai announced. Marcus, would you monitor the quantum field stability during transition? Marcus activated his diagnostic displays, watching as Serenity's hybrid systems prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel. The readings looked good, but he could see the subtle instabilities that would grow into system failure if they remained in hyperspace too long. Field generators are stable. Resonance patterns are within acceptable parameters. We're good for jump. Serenity, engage hyperdrive. The transition was unlike anything Marcus had experienced on human or standard alien vessels. Instead of the jarring discontinuity of conventional hyperspace entry, Serenity seemed to slip between dimensions with fluid grace. Reality blurred around them, stars stretching into lines of light before resolving into the swirling chaos of hyperspace itself. Jump successful, Lyraliai reported. We're clear of the system. Marcus watched his displays as the ship settled into hyperspace cruise, the quantum fields maintaining stability despite the temporary modifications. How long to reach the nebula? 8 minutes at current velocity. Well within our safety margin. For the first time since the Andromedans had discovered the ship, Marcus allowed himself to relax slightly. They'd escaped immediate capture, and soon they'd be able to complete the repairs properly. Whatever came next, they'd have a fully functional ship capable of outrunning any pursuit. Marcus, Lyraliai said quietly, there's something I need to tell you while we have a few minutes. The tone of her voice made him look up from his displays. What is it? This isn't the end of our difficulties. Escaping the Andromedans was just the first step. There are other forces that will be interested in Serenity's technology, and not all of them will be as straightforward as military pursuit. What kind of other forces? Corporate interests that profit from the current transportation monopolies. Criminal organizations that make fortunes from smuggling operations that would become unnecessary with free movement technology. Political factions that depend on controlling the flow of information between systems. Marcus felt a familiar sinking sensation. How many enemies are we talking about? Potentially thousands of individual groups, representing dozens of species and commercial interests. Serenity's technology doesn't just threaten the Andromeda Collective's monopoly, it threatens an entire economic structure that's been in place for centuries. So this becomes a permanent situation. We can never stop running. Not exactly. Lyralii brought up a stellar chart showing their current position relative to various colonies and trade routes. We don't have to run forever. We just have to survive long enough to distribute the technology so widely that no single force can suppress it. How long would that take? Years, probably. But, Marcus, the impact would be extraordinary. Imagine human colonies that could trade directly with any system in the galaxy without paying tribute to transportation cartels. Independent worlds that could unite for mutual defense without relying on approval from major powers. Species that have been marginalized for centuries suddenly having access to the same mobility advantages as the established civilizations. Marcus studied the star chart, trying to imagine the galaxy Lyralii was describing. It was an appealing vision, but the practical challenges seemed overwhelming. Where would we start? I have contacts among the frontier colonies, groups that are already organized to resist economic exploitation. If we can provide them with ships equipped with Serenity's technology, they could begin establishing independent trade networks. And, you have the resources to fund that kind of operation? My family's assets, properly leveraged, could purchase and upgrade hundreds of ships. The technical challenge would be adapting Serenity's systems for mass production and integration with conventional vessels. That's a massive undertaking. We're talking about reshaping galactic civilization. Yes. And, I can't do it alone. Lyralii turned toward him, those luminous eyes holding depths of hope and determination. I need someone with your technical skills and philosophical perspective. Someone who understands that the best engineering solutions serve people, not just profit margins. Marcus felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. 3 days ago, his biggest ambition had been keeping his repair shop solvent for another month. Now he was being asked to help engineer a revolution in galactic transportation and economics. What about my life? My plans? I had obligations on Kepler Station. Your old life is gone, Marcus. The moment you helped repair Serenity, you became a target of forces that don't forgive or forget. But, you can build a new life, one that matters on a scale you never imagined possible. And, if we fail? If the established powers prove too strong to overcome? Then, we'll have tried. And, trying is more than most people ever do when faced with systemic injustice. The hyperspace chronometer showed 2 minutes remaining until they reached the nebula. Around them, the chaotic energies of faster-than-light space swirled in patterns that seemed almost alive, a constant reminder that they were traveling through realms where normal physics held only tentative authority. There's something else, Lyralii said. Something I haven't told you about my motivations for this work. More revelations? Personal ones. 5 years ago, when I decided to leave my family's corporate empire, it wasn't just because I disagreed with our business practices. I was engaged to be married, a political alliance between our family and another major industrial consortium. Marcus waited for her to continue, sensing the emotional weight of whatever she was about to share. The marriage would have been comfortable, profitable, and completely empty. My intended spouse saw me as a business asset, a way to merge two fortunes and strengthen his political position. There was no love, no real partnership, just calculated mutual advantage. So you ran away. I ran away. And, for 5 years, I've been telling myself it was about political principles and galactic justice. Which is true, but not complete. She looked directly at Marcus. I've been searching for something I wasn't sure existed. Partnership based on shared values rather than mutual profit. Trust earned through demonstrated integrity rather than contractual obligation. And, you think you found that? I think I found someone who repairs broken things because they need fixing, not because he's paid to do it. Someone who risks his safety to help a stranger, and continues working even when the situation becomes dangerous. Lyralii's voice grew soft. I think I've found someone who sees people as more important than profits. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. Lyralii, this is a lot to process. The technology sharing, the economic revolution, and now someone admitting she's developed feelings for the engineer who saved her ship. She smiled, transforming her already beautiful features into something radiant. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, Marcus. I'm just being honest about all the factors you should consider when deciding whether to continue this partnership. The hyperspace chronometer reached 0, and Serenity began the transition back to normal space. Around them, the swirling chaos of hyperspace dissolved into the breathtaking vista of the Kepler Nebula, vast clouds of glowing gas and forming stars stretching across light years of space. We're here, Lyralii announced unnecessarily. Safe harbor for completing the repairs. Marcus stared out at the nebula's beauty while his mind raced through everything that had changed in the past few days. His old life was gone, that much was certain. The question was what he wanted to build in its place. The full system integration, he said finally. How long will it take in normal space? 12 hours, assuming no complications. And, after that, we'd have a ship capable of outrunning any pursuit, with technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Yes. And, a partnership that includes both professional collaboration and personal possibilities. If you want it to. Marcus looked around Serenity's bridge, at displays showing systems he'd helped repair, at the vast beauty of the nebula stretching beyond the viewports. This ship had become more than just an engineering challenge, it had become a symbol of possibilities he'd never imagined. Lyralii, I spent 20 years fixing other people's machines for just enough money to survive. I told myself I was content with that, but, the truth is, I always felt like I was wasting my potential on problems that didn't really matter. And, now I have the chance to work on problems that could affect the entire galaxy. With someone who shares my values and appreciates my skills. With unlimited resources and technology that pushes the boundaries of what's possible. Marcus turned toward her, decision crystallizing in his mind. How could I walk away from that? Lyralii's smile was radiant. Then, you'll stay? You'll help me build this new galaxy we've been imagining? I'll stay. We'll build it together. Marcus activated his diagnostic displays, already planning the approach to the full system integration. But, first, let's make sure Serenity is running at full capacity. If we're going to challenge the established order, we'll need every advantage we can get. As Marcus began the complex process of optimizing Serenity's quantum systems, he reflected on the extraordinary series of events that had brought him to this moment. A simple repair job had become a galactic adventure, a mysterious client had revealed herself to be both an industrial heiress and a woman of remarkable courage, and a struggling engineer had discovered that his skills could help reshape civilization itself. Outside the viewports, the Kepler Nebula continued its ancient work of birthing new stars, a fitting backdrop for the beginning of their own work of creating new possibilities for the countless beings who called the galaxy home. Marcus Chen had always believed that every problem had a solution if you were willing to think creatively enough. He was about to find out if that philosophy could fix what was broken in the galaxy itself. And, for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do, with exactly the right person as his partner in the greatest engineering challenge of his career. The repairs could wait a few more hours. Right now, Marcus wanted to enjoy the sight of new stars being born in the nebula's glowing embrace, a reminder that even in the vast darkness of space, light and hope could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes the most extraordinary adventures really did begin with someone who simply refused to abandon a problem that needed solving.